Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Era of Atlantis. Well, hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Era of Atlantis. Thank you to CJ Games for sponsoring this video, and you can check out their Kickstarter link down below. It is now live, so you can see everything that they have planned for this game. Now we're going to get all into what this game is all about. It's very interesting because you're going to be working with opponents, but it is a competitive game. But with that being said, this is a prototype copy in front of me, and something that I would love to know is I am using these wooden soldier meeples to represent small ones for ones and larger ones for fives, and those will be miniatures in the final game. So check out the link just to see everything, especially the miniatures and the sculpts that they have planned. But with that, we're going to take a look at Era of Atlantis. Era of Atlantis takes place in a world 12,000 years ago when the polar ends were a bit different. So this is a map of the world, which is supposed to be our world, but what it looked like 12,000 years ago according to the lore of the game. So we do have Atlantis here and Lemuria and other, places that are made out of lore, but could have potentially existed. And all of these different secret societies are trying to influence these different nations, all for different control. So when you're playing, you are actually playing as a secret society, such as the Sisters of the Starlight here, which is the pink player. And you can see here that a lot of the tokens on the map are these primary colors, and there are these tracks which are for the different nations. So for example, we have Lemuria, we have Atlantis, Aztlan, which is actually not in this current game, and Hyperborea. We also have Brahmapura here. So those are the 5 nations, and each player is going to have 2 of them represented by their society. So you can see here that Lemuria is being controlled by both the Sisters of the Starlight and the Lemurian Brotherhood, but Atlantis is being controlled by the Lemurian Brotherhood, as well as the Purple Dragon Society. So during the setup of the game, players are going to have their starting society, and then after that they'll be able to snake draft for the different control of these different nations, and that will affect everything that they do throughout the game. As you may have already guessed, you are working with other players, and you are taking actions for these different nations which will benefit both of you, but you are also working toward your own personal goals and that scoring edge that you will be able to have against your opponent, and you will be able to track all of that here on this scoring board, which not only represents the power for the nations throughout the game, but it will be endgame scoring. Now the thing that's the most interesting is you will score for the points for whatever nation you are least in. So for example, if the game were to currently end and I had Atlantis and Brahmapura, then Brahmapura is a 4 and Atlantis is a 5, meaning that I would score 4 at the end of the game. Now these scores do go much higher than that, but just to give you that example, that's what you are working toward, is keeping both of your nations equally as strong with this area control on the board to ensure that your weakest nation still scores you a lot of points. Now the pace of play of the game is going to be pretty snappy, where every player takes 1 turn per round. And while you're doing this, you're able to take your actions either from your nations that you control or from your society and those actions that you have available to you. I'll go over all of those actions in a minute, but the end game is triggered in one of 3 ways. There are 3 different endings that the players are trying to work toward, and we're going to go over those first to kind of make the game make a bit more sense. Throughout the game, the most straightforward way for the game to end is when one of these tokens hits the end marker. So we have an end tracker here, which this will occasionally move down, and of course the round tracker will also move up. So when those do meet, that is one way to trigger the end of the game. Now that is known as the continuation ending, but there's also a doom marker here on the track as well. And if the doom marker meets the time marker, then that would be the pole shift instead. This is when the poles are shifting and everyone is losing. Not necessarily that is just a way to trigger the end game, but it is the thematic reason that basically the world is ending and cataclysm is here. Finally, there is the Ascension route, which is when everyone is saved, and that is with the Temple of Light. So here you can see all of these temples, and these are temples that are buildings that are going to be placed out throughout the game. Now, temples can also be destroyed, so you'll be placing them from bottom up, and if they're ever destroyed, you'll be placing them back from top to bottom, meaning that you'll need all 7 placed out at the end of the game for that to be an end game scoring. Now there is also a priority order if you meet all of those conditions at the end of a particular round, and the ascension would be prioritized first, but there are also these 4 temples of light that are locked at the beginning of the game. When you walk through any of these spots with a white cube, they will be placed over here starting with the bottom, unlocking the different temples, as well as when any token meets these here on the board. So all of these white cubes are going to be placed here to unlock further temples, and additionally at the end of the game, when nations control areas with temples, they provide a +2 points at the end of the game for that particular nation. Now again, that has to be your least scoring nation for that to be the one that you score for, but that will augment the scores at the end of the game. Now let's take a look at your society actions. So on your society player board here, you'll see that you have 2 markers that you will use to denote which actions you are taking throughout the game. And as I said, you can either take your society actions, or you are also able to use your nation actions, but we'll go over these first. You'll use your first marker, and then you would use your second, one that is unplaced, before moving the one that has already been placed, kind of blocking actions from you so that you can't do 2 of the same thing in a row, but other than that, you will use these to show which actions you are doing. You also have Varia here. Varia will be worth points at the end of the game. If you have up to 22, you will have 5 points at the end of the game, but it's also something that you want to be spending because you'll use it to do a lot of things throughout the game. One of the things that you'll be doing is this intrigue action here, which is summoning your different agents to the board. Now you will start with some agents already on the board, but these agents are going to be your political value because you are either trying to win political or militia battles throughout the game. So for your political value, you would take this intrigue action to summon your agents, paying 1 Varia each, except for the ones that cost 0. Those would not have to be paid for at all. And any that are already summoned on the board, you can move around to different areas for free at the beginning of your turn. Now after intrigue, those guys are very important because you can then throw a coup. If you try to do the coup action, you would come over here and you would be able to try to take control of a certain area. Now, if no one currently has it, you basically use your agents and their numbers and compare it against the political value of that area. So for example, down here, this political value is only 1, meaning it would be pretty easy for an agent to take control of it. However, if you are trying to throw a coup against other players and other nations, then they will be able to have their chance to both react and add their different agents before the totals are calculated to see who would win the coup. Now when the coup is won, that is taken over for the current nation, so there are these markers here to show that you have taken control of the area with your different agents, and then the power level of that nation would adjust to show that they now have a stronger power for the area that they control. Now, because you're actually playing as these secret societies supporting the different nations, you have these voting dials that you'll be able to use. Now, when these different conflicts happen, whether they are political or military, you're going to have these different choices. If a player is involved in the battle and they represent the nation being attacked, they have to then defend. If they represent the attackers, they would then have to attack. However, if they are neutral or represent both, then they are able to make their choice of what they want to do, and they would use this dial to do so. Now, a neutral choice would be this 0 over here, but then you would show the side of the attacker or the defensor, basically voting on who you want to put your power toward, because there will be repercussions. The final society action is repolarize, which is extremely interesting and what can really make or break the game for your society, and that is you would play Varia equal to the number of costs for the round. So in round 1 you would only be paying 1, but if you do use the moon card, which I'll get to what that would mean in a second, but if you choose to take the moon card, you would get 6 Varia back as well, which can be used to pay for the action. Now when you do this, players start with 2 of these cards in their hand at the beginning of the game, and to take this action, you take 2 of them into your hand and then choose what you would like to do and put 2 back, either into the stack of shuffled cards or back on top in either order. Now this is a way to enhance endgame scoring because, for example, you could have 3 ascensions placed here at the end of the game. If there are ascensions here and here, they will contribute to endgame scoring with this bottom showing. So for each ascension card a player would have, if that's the endgame trigger that wins, then you would get 2 additional Viria, and you would get 1 additional point if it was in this place instead. If it was in Ploth, you would get both abilities as well. Now players are working with those 2 cards in their hand, trying to match up with what they think will be the end game trigger. That will provide points for them at the end of the game, depending on if they are the one that is able to accurately predict what the end game trigger will be, and that's why repolarizing can be extremely important, especially when it's cheapest at the beginning of the game. Now to move on to the different nation abilities, which again, all players are able to use, but you do have to stagger which ones you are using, and you have to select the correct nation that you want to be activating. So the first thing that you are able to do is collect Viria. Again, that's the main resource in the game that you'll be spending for different things, and you will collect Viria equal to the current power cost of that nation. But be careful, because your opponent, who also controls that nation, will also collect that much Viria on their turn, so you're kind of triggering that for them. The next thing that you're able to do is construct a building, which I'm going to come back to at the end and go through what the different buildings provide, but this is how you would place different buildings throughout the board. The next one would be recruit, and recruit is when you would summon different soldiers to the different areas of that nation. You would summon recruits equal to the number of power for that particular area, including any augments made by their buildings. So for example, here in Lemuria, the base power would be 5, summoning 5 troops. However, anything on top of that that is additional with buildings, it could summon even more troops in that area instead. One final thing to note is that for every additional Viria you spend when recruiting, you are also able to summon additional units for that nation. Now the next action is going to be move and conflict. Now in order to move around the board, first I'm going to quickly go over these oceans because you will need a lot of units to move across these. So here we have the Brahminian Ocean, which has a 3 showing on it, and you also have different areas such as up here, which is a boat with just a 1 on it. So to go across these areas, you will lose that many troops going through it. So you are able to pass through that area. However, you need to be able to get at least 1 troop across that area. So from Atlantis here to cross the Brahminian Ocean, they would have to summon more troops as they only have 3, and they would lose all 3 into the ocean trying to cross here. However, if they go north instead, they would be able to cross this area, losing just 1 troop along the way to the ocean. Now, other than that, all troops are able to move to 1 adjacent land spot, and when you do so, you could potentially trigger a conflict. Now, you're only able to trigger 1 conflict per turn unless you pay 5 Viria for each additional conflict, and the conflicts for militia are going to look very similar to the ones for a coup and the political side. Now, when looking at the board, there is this garrison value, and that's going to be added to the different areas, making them a lot stronger. So you can see Lemuria down here has a value of 5, meaning that when this area is attacked, it already has a base defense of 5 on top of anything that is added to it. Now, the final nation action is going to be global conflict. This is going to cost you 7 Viria to do, and is going to be really detrimental across the board. When you claim global conflict, you will add up the number of your troops and compare them to another nation that you are attacking. When you do this, the defending nation will also add their garrison value, and when you compare these 2 numbers, you will see who either wins or loses, and depending on what can happen, it can be very, very detrimental. So now let's talk about all of the different repercussions of both the coups and the battles, now that you understand a little bit more about what's happening on the board. Now, during the coup action, players are using this style to demonstrate how much Viria they are willing to spend for that particular coup. This Viria is lost when it happens, and you're hoping that voting a certain way and spending your Viria will allow you to throw this coup in your favor. Now, when the coup is successful, then the territory marker will change, and you'll make sure that you change the power trackers for the different nations accordingly, because power will be lost from one nation and then gained from the other if it's taken from a nation. And during the battles, a couple things will happen as well. So if the attacker should win, then all of the defending units are removed from the map, an agent is also removed, a building is destroyed, which can be very detrimental because there's definitely casualties, and due to this, the doom marker will move forward on the track. But if the defenders win, then the attackers will be removed from the board, and everything's fine and stays as is. Finally, during a global conflict, the player whose turn it is will choose one of the consequences to happen to the defeated nation, which would be either removing 2 buildings or a minor nation control marker, moving the doom marker 1 step forward for every building destroyed, and removing half of their military units. Now we're going to talk a bit about the buildings, because control on this map is really what matters most in the game, and getting these nations' power levels as high as possible while also trying to unlock these temples, but all of those actions are augmented and made even stronger by the different buildings that you'll construct. So starting off here with the base, you are able to construct this and it will give you a +5 to your garrison. So if built here in Lemuria, I would have a 10 to my garrison instead, making it a base 10 on top of anyone else that is already there. And additionally, when recruiting, any place with a base will get 3 additional units added to their spot when you use the recruit action. Similarly, there is the capital, which will give you a +5 for political stability. So that will give you +5 for the coups and when they will be thrown with the agents, and it will give you more power with your different agents, and it will also increase your intrigue action, allowing you to summon 2 additional agents for free. There are also factories, and factories are going to let you take an additional building action on future turns. It doesn't have to be where the factory is placed, but it would be for any additional turns you'd be able to augment that action. And on top of that, it gives you +1 for conflict. So you would have a +1 for any factories built when that global conflict would be triggered. There are also pyramids, and pyramids are going to add power. It's just going to give you straight up power, which again will augment different actions, such as how many troops will be recruited to a specific area. But a pyramid will provide +1 power unless in the same spot with a temple, either the dark or the light, and then it would provide +2 power instead. Now there's also the Temple of Darkness, and this is going to gain you Viria for the Doom marker immediately for the steps that it has moved forward, so you are able to use these to gain Viria and place them out. However, when these buildings are destroyed, these are the only ones that would not create Doom for being destroyed. Now finally we have our Temples of Light, which I've already mentioned, but their special ability is that they're going to provide that +2 power at the end of the game. So you do want them placed out within your different nations that you control to be able to have them add power here for you, and also gain you closer to triggering endgame, hopefully having those objective cards in your hand. Overall, Era of Atlantis is a game for 3 to 5 players with a lot of different strategies on how you can approach the game, and you also know that other players are working toward the nations that you are supporting, so you need to be sure to not make them too strong while also make sure they are working for you, and just pay attention to your secret society that you are making stronger and stronger. As I mentioned, there is a Kickstarter link down below for you to check out. Thank you to CJ Games for sponsoring this video, and I'd also like to note that their previous game, Galactic Era, is also compatible with this game for a campaign mode. Check out everything that they have to say on that to see exactly what that would look like, but I believe that they are both compatible together, and you'll be able to play a campaign style game as well if that's something that you might be interested in. Another thing you might be interested in is that there's going to be a 3-player gameplay on the channel, so you're able to check that out to see a bit more of how this gameplay works, especially with the area control and the different conflicts that will happen, so stay tuned for that. I'm Professor Meg, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.